Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. It's Wei T. Lightheart from the Prosperity and Health Alliance, and we have a extremely special show for you today. I am joined today by none other than the medical advisor for Enagic, Dr. Horst Filtzer, who is joining us from, I believe, from Bullhead City, Arizona. Is that correct, Dr. Filtzer?
Correct, yes. We're out in the desert, and it's cooler now. It's pretty nice.
Well, I have to say we've been anxiously awaiting this interview for some time because a little backstory before we get into it. 10 years ago when I was introduced to Kangen Water, I was impressed by its ability to reduce inflammation from my training, and it had a significant positive effect on my recovery. And I wrote a little book about it. It wasn't a scientific book. It was an anecdotal book that I wrote years ago to share about the benefits of the water, and that went out and all around. Now, as fate would have it, Dr. Filtzer was attracted to Enagic, and he'll get into that story in just a minute, and he has produced an incredible book right here, which scientifically validated what happened to me 10 years ago, and that's no small accomplishment. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Horst's background, what attracted him to the water, and more importantly, he's going to talk a little bit about some of the things that people shouldn't say about Kangen water. There's a lot of misinformation out there, which he addresses at the front of the book. But there is some legitimate scientific reasons why people can benefit from drinking this water. So without any further ado, Dr. Filtzer, you want to share a little bit about your medical background and your history and your career up to this point?
Well, I think at the beginning, I would like to say that I'm an exceptionally lucky person. I was born in Poland during World War II. When the Soviet Army came, my mother, grandmother, and my two sisters had to leave and basically flee from the onslaught of the Red Army and wound up in what is now East Germany. My father was a prisoner of war in the United States because he was in the Africa Corps. But to make a long story very short, we wound up in the United States, of all places, in Fargo, North Dakota, and I went to high school there, and I went to the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, and subsequently to medical school at Harvard. And that is why I consider myself so lucky. I mean, who would have thought that a guy from nowhere would wind up at Harvard Medical School? And it has been a wonderful experience, and it's been extremely satisfying. I stayed within the Harvard system as chief of surgery at the Cambridge City Hospital for about 38 years. And then when I retired, I came to Bullhead City because I owned some property there. Of all things, I found retirement deadly. Do not ever retire. Drop dead, but never retire, because it's dementing. And, I'm not an avid golfer. I do ride my Harley. I did until this year when my wife made me stop it. But I've ridden my bike everywhere on the continental United States. And I still miss it, but to make a long story short, I went back to work, and I practiced vascular and general surgery in Bullhead City when I met a patient who came in complaining of pain, hadn't known him before. Make a long story short, being a vascular surgeon, pain being in the abdomen, radiating to the back, I checked him out, and he had a huge aortic aneurysm, and I fixed it. In any case, he turned out to be at the University of North Dakota at the same time that I was. So I hadn't known him, but I said, you need to stick around here for a few days. But he lived in Las Vegas. I said, you stay at my house. I have a big house, and I'm alone. So he brings this machine to my house and asked me if he could hook it up to my sink. I said, knock yourself out. Be my guest. Anyway, that's in 2008. He turned on the water. He said, would you like to drink some? I said, no, I'll have a beer, But anyway, I did. And it's strange. It was a different experience. It was something I had not had before, and I liked it. So based on that, I bought a machine, and so the rest is history. I got into the company by being asked to be the medical advisor, together with Dr. Shinya, who has since retired. But make a long story short, I wanted to know how all of this works. And all the literature I got was sort of in roundworms and flatworms and in different non-mammalian species and occasionally a dog experiment, this and that. But how does it really work in the human body? The claim was it's microclustered. The claim is that it is an antioxidant and can adjust your pH. But what's the evidence? And as you and I talked about, I hold up the dollar bill when I give a talk. In God we trust, and everybody else needs evidence. And that's how it started. Yeah, there you go. And I tried very hard for a number of years to get the company to sponsor some research, which they finally did. And I guess we can talk about the results so far and what should be done in the future today.
Definitely some great points. Thank you for sharing your background. And of course, you're very humble. You're very accomplished in your profession. Anyone do a little search online about Dr. Horst Filtzer's background, it's quite impressive. You also served in the military as well. Yes. As a medical officer. And so to all our veterans out there, again, those are extreme conditions that people are subjected to. Especially as a surgeon where you're dealing with the ones that, get messed up in a very bad way. So thank you for all your work on that. So we talked about, before we get into the results, I think I want to address something first, and that is, I know you mentioned it in your book, and I think it's a really valid point, is that when you first got attracted to the company, there was a lot of people making some very unsubstantiated claims, doing some things that were doing a disservice to alkaline ionized water and to Enagic and to the company. Do you want to just touch on that briefly before we get into what Kangen water is? In other words, so what isn't it? Or so that people know, because I don't want people to get themselves in trouble by, they get an experience, they drink the water, and they start going off on these wild claims, and it really doesn't do the company any benefit or right. People.
I think that, again, when I got acquainted with the company, there was, this big claim about Warburg, the great medical doctor and chemist and biochemist, who got the Nobel Prize, and where he talked about the oxidative phosphorylation of normal metabolism and the fact that cancer cells don't have oxidative phosphorylation. They don't need oxygen. Their metabolism is like that of grapes when you ferment them into wine. It's fermentation. But with that, they provide enough energy to be able to multiply without an extra control. And that's how they kill us, because they can just keep multiplying and so on. And when that metabolism occurs, these cancer cells produce an acidic environment because of the fermentation. They produce excess lactic acid, which normal cells can get rid of, but these cells can't. So there was this presumption that cancer cannot live in an alkaline environment. And of course, the guy never said that. I mean, that's not true at all. And so there was all kinds of misinformation about how you need an alkaline diet and you need to drink alkaline water and then you're going to cure cancer. And of course, the water doesn't cure anything. What the water does do is help the body heal itself if it has the necessary parameters and ingredients, because it's a good thing to drink. Now, going on from there, there were other things, and I don't, want to name names or anything like that, but there were people giving testimonials. You know, a testimonial is very, very interesting, and I actually gave one, except I didn't think I was saying anything about any cure. I just said it made me feel better. But there are people that claimed they had cured cancer, and there was one guy who cured bladder cancer and all kinds of stuff. And that is just patently false. And so I tried to put the premise on how the water works on a solid basis. And I realized that, you know, if we're claiming to have an antioxidant activity in the body, what's the proof? If you want to get your supplements or your vitamins and so on approved by the FDA, you have to show a structure-function effect. In other words, resveratrol, approved by the FDA as a healthy supplement, has to be able to show that there is an uptick in the antioxidant activity in the plasma and in the blood. Well, when you try to do that with water, and Kangen water specifically, it never seemed to work. And my feeling was it's probably an issue of the methodology. And I turned out to be right. I found a laboratory that used a totally different test from the usual ORAC test or HORAC test. And it depended upon red cell deprived of antioxidants. And sure enough, as it turned out, when we tested it, we have an absolute positive proof that in living human tissue, living human cells, Kangen water, pH 9.5, is a strong antioxidant. And that is incontrovertible. It's like, you know, it is or it isn't, but this one is. And based on that, we've done some other studies, and we can talk about those if you like.
And for those who are listening, the differentiation, so for most people who are familiar with the testing of antioxidants, Horst referred to the ORAC scale, which is the traditional way of measuring an antioxidant. What was the difference that you did, or what was the different methodology that you used to measure the antioxidants? Because I know there'll probably some scientific people that will get access to this at some point and would be interested in that particular methodology that you use to demonstrate that Kangen water elicits an antioxidant effect in the body.
There's a laboratory in Klamath Falls, Oregon, run by Dr. Gitte Jensen, who developed this proprietary test. It's a CAP-E test. It's an erythrocyte living tissue culture test where they deprive the erythrocytes of antioxidants, and then when they add antioxidants to it, it has a reaction and they can measure it. Now, the ORAC test and all those other tests were all based on colorimetric tests. And, you know, I'm not a biochemist per se, but if you don't have color to the substance or can't add color to the substance, it doesn't work. And water is odorless, colorless, and tasteless, allegedly. So anyway, it's a single test unique to this laboratory, and it's a great laboratory. It's highly accredited, and has done some great work, particularly in immune systems.
Fantastic. So let's talk about some of the tests that you run. I think you did something, you did the antioxidants, you did some exercise testing, and you were demonstrating some positive responses in inflammation and recovery. I think you did some athletic tests and stuff inside the book. You want to talk a little bit, I guess it was, you measured Kangen water for the antioxidant properties, which are measurable against ordinary tap water, correct? And proved.
Right.
Yeah. And the proof there was?
Well, the proof was that the ordinary tap water in that particular region has a pH of about 8.6, 8.5, and the ionized water, pH 9.5, was absolutely superior in producing a good measurable antioxidant effect. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, I had to convince the company to fund these things. And I figured if I could convince them to spend some short money with some tests in tissue culture that would prove to be, beneficial, or at least prove our hypothesis, then they might be willing to cough up a few more bucks for some human tissue, human participant culture studies, like a significant number of people involved in the study. The magic number is 12 to 13 for statistical purposes. So the initial studies in tissue culture showed an antioxidant effect, and it showed an effect of being able to suppress the inflammatory response. And that's huge because we say, anecdotally, that this stuff is good for itis, for arthritis, and sinusitis, and all kinds of different things that are based on inflammation. So if you have something that suppresses inflammation, you can do a lot of people a lot of good. Think of the model of the arterial plaque, where there's an injury from free radicals to the plaque, and then the inflammatory response to that injury, trying to heal the injury, actually results in deposition of cholesterol and all kinds of things, in a progressive event, unless it's unchecked, that can give you occlusion of large blood vessels, medium blood vessels, and blood vessels critical, like to your brain and to your heart, and so on. So that's just one example of the inflammatory response being responsible for virtually the majority of diseases of our civilization. And so if you have something that subdues that response, and most importantly, it's totally non-toxic and there's no side effects from it at all, then you'd have something, and we in fact have shown that to be true. And then the other benefit was that we showed that when you take this water in conjunction with glucose and put it into the cell, the mitochondria, which are the engine of the cells, are upregulated in their activity. It's sort of like you have, a four-cylinder engine, and you bore and stroke it, and you crank it up, and from 10 horsepower it goes to 20. And that's what happens in our mitochondria. Those were the first tests. And they were inexpensive, and they were profound. And so we went on to a test that involved 13 participants, where we gave them an exercise challenge. And the exercise challenge was one that was predetermined: sit-ups, push-ups, so on. It's a total of 30 minutes of exercise in basically healthy people. And we did that for a month at a time, where the first month they only drank tap water, and then we tested them for recovery from the exercise. We tested them for subjective responses to the exercise. We measured red cell count, white cell count, and also collected a huge panel of serum and plasma from every participant at different phases of the exercise. When the second phase occurred, where they drank Kangen water only, it became evident that the Kangen water group, number one, had much greater tolerance to the exercise. Their red blood cell count went up dramatically and significantly, which meant that their oxygen carrying capacity was increased. The inflammatory response, as evidenced by a neutrophil count and inflammatory cell count, was subdued, indicating that there was a lesser response to the stress of the exercise, and also a quicker recovery from the exercise. And then finally, on a standard accepted psychometric test, the people who drank the water recovered more quickly from the stress of exercise, and also had much less discomfort during and after the exercise. Now, that's what we have established with this test. What we need to do is test the serum samples for all the different cytokines involved in inflammation, involved in stress recovery. Superoxide dismutase, for example, is a huge anti-inflammatory enzyme that the body kicks out to really get nasty against bad, anti-oxidative stress. That we want to see what that does, but we're stuck because of financial issues right now. And so that's where I am. I'm trying to peddle my book. I take no money from it. I have, as a matter of fact, I've actually paid for the whole thing myself. And I figure we can keep going with this exercise, because every time that you find a good result or even a bad result, it stimulates you to go further and to really see that it is for real. I don't think that this is the cure for the illnesses of civilization, but boy, it's a great help. Imagine that you can drink water and actually ameliorate a lot of your conditions. And I think this has got great promise. And most importantly, it kind of takes the naysayers who think it's all nonsense and puts them in their place. To say something is good without proof is just as bad as saying something is bad without proof. And so proof rules.
You made some profound statements there. Inflammation, to summarize, I know, of course, being in the health industry for a long time, it's this, often we call it the silent killer. Like any other thing in the body, you kind of feel what's happening. If I cut my arm or I hit my head, or there's pain, there's see things. But inflammation is something that's happening pretty much all the time for people, and contributes to the degenerative conditions that go along with the aging process, or the human condition, as you will. So you made a pretty profound statement as well, that an increase in red blood cell production by using Kangen water. Do you understand what the mechanism for that is? Because as an athlete, particularly endurance-based athletes, they're always trying to find ways to increase oxygen carrying capacity and eliminate carbon dioxide. And of course, that was where people got into erythropoietin and all these performance-enhancing drugs that increase red blood cell count. Do we understand the mechanism yet, or is it we just know that it does it?
I think we do understand some of it. I think that obviously when you have something that subdues inflammation, also keeps your pH in line so you don't become too acidic, that it is able to stimulate the bone marrow to crank out more red cells. Why do these runners, these long distance guys, go up to the Andes, at 14,000 feet and actually run around there, which would kill me if I went up there. But that's why, because that deprivation in the oxygen stimulates the bone marrow to make more red cells. So it's somewhere along that mechanism, and the most important thing is, I may not understand the whole mechanism, but it's there. You can measure it.
You said another thing, the suppression of the anti-inflammatory response in neutrophils. Could you explain what a neutrophil is to the layman so they understand that?
The neutrophil is a scavenger. It's a cell that responds. It's a first responder cell to invaders. They can be bacterial, they can be viral, they can be foreign body, and they can be non-specific inflammation. And you know that our own body produces inflammation against our own body. There's this huge complement of autoimmune disease, starting with rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. And I mean, it's just a gigantic list. And when these neutrophils are challenged by a inflammatory something, they come out and try to suppress and attack it and squash it. Now, that sets up a further reaction. And it's that reaction that causes the damage. So if you can get certain of these invaders subdued, in other words, have less of an inflammatory response, particularly against your own kind, your own tissues, your own cells, like in autoimmune diseases, that's a good thing. That's what we base all of our therapy on. You talk about all these things, you know, even for psoriasis, which is an autoimmune disease, we use these immune modulators now. We use them in ulcerative colitis, like Remicade and all kinds of CADEs, you know, different kind of, and they're all based on immune modulation. It's new. Prior to that, we had, you know, steroids, and steroids for short term are okay, but you know, if you take them for a long period of time, they'll kill you. The blood decrease your immune response. They will demineralize your bones. They'll thin your skin. They'll waste your muscles. They'll make you look funny. And so these kind of interrelationships between immunity and neutrophils favorably affected by something, it's a good thing.
One more thing that you touched on was the energy production at the mitochondria. Can you explain a little bit about the mitochondria for people listening today, and why that is a profound response?
Well, the mitochondria are those, they're called organelles within the cell, in which glucose is metabolized into energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, which then goes throughout our body to allow our muscles to contract, our nerves to conduct, and so on and so forth. And that, in the presence, glucose has to be there. But for some reason, that water kind of speeds up. It's like a governor. It increases the rate of production of the ATP, which is probably, in your case, what you noticed, that you seem to, you know, do your athletic stuff a little bit more easily or a little bit with more vigor. That's the reason you had a higher development or a higher production of ATP. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think that's a very exciting point, because I know in the kind of like in the performance side, or as they quote unquote today, the biohackers, the people that are experimenting with improved performance, brain function, and kind of dealing with the world today, they're all talking about the mitochondria and energy production. It's now becoming quite common in parlance amongst people who are studying human performance and improving energy and dealing with the modern world today. Now, there's something that you touched about in the book, and I think this is really important. It was a little side part, and it was the difference between in vitro and in humans. Can you explain that for people so that they understand, if they're quoting aspect of the book, of what that is and what your work demonstrates here?
In vitro is basically in a test tube.
Right.
And in vivo is in the actual human being. Now, if you do in vitro studies, which we did at the beginning, but we are using human cells, then it appears logical that you can extrapolate that to an actual living human being, because the cells are the same, right? Now, if you do the same thing in a tadpole or in some other non-mammalian system, even doing it in dogs or other mammals is closer to the human condition. But so many of these things were done in planaria worms. They cut a worm in half and put it in Kangen water and say it regenerated faster. I don't know what the hell that's supposed to do for anybody. So in vitro is test tube work, in vivo is in living, and you know, in vivo living animals are good models, and they're good things to do, because clearly mammals are mammals. We all are, and there is stronger similarities. But when you get off mammalian species and everything else, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so responses in fruit flies aren't really aren't really scientific validation.
You know, Gregor Mendel did genetics with pea plants, and that's fine because it only proves one sector. You're only checking, you know, what inheritance modules are. But it gets a little more complicated when you try to give birth, you know.
No doubt. One of the things that, and just to confirm, these were done, you did this first in vitro, and then you actually did this with real live students. Yep. And I believe your statement in Las Vegas when you were presenting your proof was this was, what was your statement for, how would you call it, proof? A completely defensible proof, or what was the word that you used?
It's a perfect defense against slander. I mean, you know, if you say that somebody is a blithering idiot, and he is, it's the end of the story. You know, he can't sue you for that. This study was great. First of all, it was a completely bulletproof study. One, it was approved by a review committee consisting of people from the community, from the scientific community, from colleges, different, that adjudicated the study for its relevance and validity. Also for the fact that no people would be harmed, and if there was harm, potentially that would be mitigated and so on. So to get a study like this done, you've got to go through a lot of hoops. And then study was presented to the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and it was put in the trials.gov section. And it's listed there with the government. And they go through this study. They don't just let you put, you know, any kind of study on that. There has to be a rigorous scientific program with it and a rigorous scientific scrutiny. And we passed all of this and continue to do so.
Which is phenomenal. Did I miss anything in regards to the study that that you felt that you would also like to share about on this? Do we cover all the points of this particular work?
I think we pretty much did it. I mean, you know, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this study kind of mandates that we continue with more. You know, it would be a tragedy to have all these samples of human plasma and tissues containing the secrets of one versus the other, Kangen versus other, and miss it. And so it's sort of a window. We need to get on with this by about the first 3 months of the year, and you know, we're working on financing it.
So let's talk about that. What would be required from your standpoint to put together and fund one of these studies? I think it'd be worthwhile that we can put together a program to fund it. What kind of funding is required? Because I know these are very rigorous. You got to get studies and all. Like, what does it take to fund a study like this?
Well, you know, I'm not comfortable with asking people for money and stuff like that. So whatever I can do through the sale of the book or whatever you, that goes towards that research. I you know, that's my contribution. The costs are, as research goes, actually not that huge. You're talking about $50,000, $60,000, but here's the point, and maybe that's why people get nervous. As soon as that study comes out and it shows some real benefit in certain areas, the next thing that will happen, you're going to want to do another study. And I think people are afraid of a snowballing effect, but that's the way research and science is. I mean, you know, first polio vaccines weren't all that great. Jonas Salk did a wonderful thing, but there are subsequent polio vaccines that were even more effective. So we learned from each step along the way. Who would have thunk that this guy Jenner, you know, immunized people in what, 17, I don't know what, 80 or something, against smallpox by using a cowpox serum to inoculate the people. I mean, it's crazy. But every little step that science does is a springboard for another project. That's what kind of intrigues me. I was so lucky in my life. Surgeons are often accused of not being the brightest bulbs on the planet, but more surgeons have won Nobel Prizes than you think of, But our whole concept is, I make an intervention using the laws of nature and removing certain diseases physically, and then using what we know about wound healing, how to put wound heals together, let the body heal itself. I find that it's kind of simplistic, but it's a great concept. Because, after they get through with their operation and they don't hate you anymore because you cut them and caused them post-operative pain or what have you, they're cured. This is the kind of thing I like. And so I think from looking at Kangen Water, I see a lot of potential that we haven't realized. And we can talk about global health. We can talk about global financial health. You don't get the word out there, and you don't have a hardcore, provable message. Yes, people will buy the machine, but if you want to do it globally, everybody should have it.
I'm going to just put the book is Kangen Water, Scientific Study Results of the Benefits of Kangen Water in the Human Tissue Culture and Living Human Volunteers. And it is available. We're going to put a link in this particular recording at www.kangenwaterstorelv.com. I'm encouraging everybody to go out and buy as many of these they can over the Christmas holidays, or whenever you're watching this, if it's past Christmas. Get these out and get these into people's hands. Get them into people who have a little bit of maybe skepticism and demand scientific rigor. And also know that the money is going to a great cause because it's going to be to fund some further studies that will further solidify and prove some of the other aspects that you believe that this water positively affects in the human body. I'm correct with that? Did I say that correctly? Perfect. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to questions and answers for Dr. Filtzer. So for those of you who are still on the call, there's a number, oh, there's actually a lot of people on here. So if you want to type in a particular question related to Kangen Water, please do so, and myself or Kim will bring that up. You can just type it into your computer. Okay, that's right. We got a bunch of people on here. And the one thing I have a question I want to lead off as some of these come up. And that is that you've been using, I believe, Kangen Water in your wound healing clinic in Bullhead City. Is that correct?
Yes, I have. As you know, pH 2.5 is a strong oxidant, right? This is a positive pH. And it has an ORP, at least in my machine, of about 1,300. And what it does, it produces a hypochlorite ion. And that water kills every germ known to man, including viruses. And I have hardcore evidence for that. We've had that tested in separate laboratories. And the beauty of it is the hypochlorite ion kills all germs, but because the water decays over time, because as it loses its electric charge, there is no tissue damage. If you use a fully buffered hypochlorite like Dakin solution, you can use it for a week or so, but after that it actually damages the tissue because it is so powerful and so strong. And so this has been, I think, very helpful in my clinic. We have very good results in my clinic.
And you deal with some pretty horrific conditions of open wounds. I've saw some of the pictures, and of course we know we have antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria, which are a problem. Is it effective against those in your?
It is effective even against the Delhi strain. and the Prague strain of MRSA, it is effective against. We have not seen any antibiotic resistance to that water.
That's an incredible thing. That's a real incredible. Just on its own, outside of the drinking water, just to have that function is incredible. Let's go to the questions here. Okay, we have the screen. Okay. This is coming from Roger Gadet. And he says, I want to tell you it was an absolute honor for you to be in the audience in Hawaii to hear my story about the Gulf War syndrome. And thank you for your kind words said to me afterwards. I always remember it. And thanks again for all you do. I guess it's not a question, but Roger, of course, is a big fan. What do we have here else? Will we receive a replay? Yes, there will be a replay to this webinar. We post all of the trainings and education on the prosperityandhealthalliance.com. You can look under videos or past trainings. There's a whole section, and all of these will be up there. This will be up here, and you can share it freely. It's no charge. It's a service to everybody who would like to witness it, and I think it's great to have Dr. Filtzer on here this evening. Do we have any other questions? Kim, do you see any other questions here? Okay. Oh, yes. Here's one from Marty Jensen. It says, after using the 2.5, I'm assuming this is on a wound or a cut or something, do you have to neutralize?
No, because you have the charge to the water, the ORP, it decays over time. And the pH of that water is evanescent. It goes away. It's not strongly buffered. So there's no tissue damage, and you don't have to neutralize it. It kind of neutralizes itself.
And about how long do you think it's effective after it's been produced?
Well, I like to, actually I've measured it. I don't like to use the water after 48 hours. I will frequently give patients water to use when they change their dressings and so on and so forth, but I make them come back every 48 hours and get a fresh bottle, because then you're depending on the ORP to be high to be most effective.
Great. Here's an unusual question. So we'll throw it out there. Can we recommend a pH application to combat premature hair loss or alopecia, internal or externally?
I haven't got the faintest idea. I'm sorry. I will say this. I think that beauty water is a great product, that pH 4.5. Yeah, 4.5. Because it does kind of tighten up the skin pores and so on. I don't know what it would do for your hair. I still got my hair, and I'm 77, so I'm lucky. All of my male members in my family were bald, so I'm the only guy who's got hair. I don't know what to tell you, but you know what they say, can't hurt.
Now here's a question. It's a little loaded, so I don't know if we can answer this, but it says, why is the water so helpful with autism, and how do we know that the 2.5 water is at its highest potential? So it's two questions there. This is from Fern.
I would have to refer you to some experts in the autism field. There is a Dr. Corinne Allen, who is a great natural health physician, and she deals with autism and cerebral palsy and all kinds of neurologic disorders that conventional medicine has sort of said we can't help you anymore. And she uses the water widely. She uses 9.5 for these people to drink, occasionally some 11.5, although the company position on that is that it shouldn't be drunk. And the results that she gets with these patients are absolutely remarkable. Google her name, Corinne Allen, ND, naturopathic doctor. Neurology is a great field, but there's a lot of diseases that can't do squat about, autism included. And she gets good results. She says that the water is the most important tool that she has. On the other hand, I'm also convinced that because of her and the fact that, Hippocrates said you've got to lay on hands, you've got to touch your patient, you've got to inspire them, you've got to be constantly involved with them, and she gets incredible results. Now, about the 2.5, I think the 2.5 is strictly a topical agent. You can't drink it, although it's probably no more acidic than 2/3 of, the soda drinks. But that's a topical agent against bacterial sanitation. It is a wonderful surface agent. It passes all the EPA standards for surface sanitation and sterilization. So that's about it.
And Dr. Corinne Allen, that's CORINNEALLEN, and I think she's also available at brainadvance.org for those who are looking. But if you search her out or type in with Kangen Water or autism, you will find her relatively quickly, and she is doing incredible work. Next question. Just try, it looks like there's two kind of questions that, okay, there are other manufacturers who claim the higher pH isn't necessary to alkalize one's body and the water doesn't do that. What do you say about that?
Well, you can alkalize the body in a variety of ways. You know, to take bicarbonate of soda, you can do all kinds of different things. You can take a strong alkaline diet, for example. But look at it this way. The water produces a pH that you can measure. It has an ORP you can measure. And it is actually capable of altering the pH. There is a experiment in a dog model, which is published at NIH.gov, where the dogs are rendered to be profoundly acidotic by basically having their kidneys removed. And when they get to a critical pH that is literally so low that it may be fatal, when they get alkaline ionized water put in their stomach or in their peritoneal cavity, you can't give it intravenously, their pH returns to normal much quicker than if they were given sodium bicarbonate. So it works. That's all I gotta say.
Someone else asked for the, what's the website for the book again? That's www.kangenwaterstorelv.com. So for those who are asking about that. So, here's a question from Mary Ave, and she's asking, first off, she wants to thank you for all that you do for the company. And she wants to know if it's okay to use 2.5 as a mouthwash on a daily basis.
It's an excellent idea. Absolutely. It's not a problem at all. Doesn't do anything to the enamel of your teeth. It is terrific antibacterial. And again, won't injure your mucous membranes. It's great.
And you don't need to
don't swallow it.
And you don't need to rinse afterwards.
No.
Okay. Someone else was going to ask that, so. Here's another. We've got some loaded ones here. I've heard that if a person is well hydrated, they will not have a heart attack. Is that correct?
Well, I hate to tell you, we call that the Harvard death. You know, all your numbers are totally in line and you drop dead the next day. I mean, nothing is going to change your genetic makeup, okay? And many, probably a majority of people who are getting heart attacks have some genetic component, a high cholesterol, family history, and then of course there's lifestyle. I mean, you can't pick your genes, but you can pick your way you live. If you smoke, which is the worst thing that you can do for your health, you can't change your diabetes because that's genetic. But if you smoke and then certain other bad lifestyles, I'm a firm believer that wine is one of God's blessings for a human being. But 4 bottles a day is not a good thing. It's like anything else in moderation. It's generally okay. So the water will not prevent your heart attack. The water will, however, help you live a better life in that it will protect a lot of the things from happening to you by virtue of pH balance and good hydration. Good hydration alone, devoid of Kangen water, just drinking good, clean water is important. There are studies in the hundreds and the thousands in Europe and in other places where it's been determined that, people with chronic diseases are chronically dehydrated, people in nursing homes, and when you change that around, the quality of life improves.
Let's see here. I put 2.5 on a lady's wound and it caused her a lot of pain and she was understandably resentful. What do you do for this problem?
Well, let me say this. I have never in my entire practice had a complaint of pain when I put the water on a wound. Never. And I'm not, saying I'm not a naysayer, but I find that exceedingly unusual. Now, there is wound pain de novo. I mean, some wounds are painful. And if you touch them or you put pressure on them, they're painful. But the water per se causing pain on a wound, sorry, I can't substantiate that. And I'm not talking about a few cases here. I mean, I treat 5,000 patients a year. I'm sorry.
Excellent response. Is it true that it's not good to drink alkalized water every day?
It's not true.
All right. Let's see. I think we've covered all the questions. We're coming up to the top of the hour. So, any final conclusions that you would like to, if you could sum up all of you've been with the company and with this project for 9 years. You've answered a lot of questions. You're doing a lot of research. Hopefully we're going to continue research, and we're definitely going to support the sales of the book from the Prosperity and Health Alliance, and also see if we can get some more funding. I think it's relevant, and I think it's part of the global mission, and it's our responsibility as humans to, if we found something that's this productive. Can you summarize what would you say? Someone comes to you and they say, what's your take on Kangen water from your background as a medical doctor?
I would say that Kangen water is a very important adjunct to a program of overall good health care, preventative medicine, and a concept of using the water and diet, exercise to improve the quality of your life. And it does that by having the 3 basic properties, which is the ability to change your acidic pH to be a strong and powerful antioxidant, and also to have the ability to be absorbed much more quickly and more efficiently into your system. And based on that differentiates it from ordinary water.
Fantastic. Dr. Filtzer, it's always a pleasure. One of my most favorite people to chat with. I know I always pull you aside as soon as I see you at any one of the events. I wish you continued good health and continued success with your research. We'll be talking more about this book here, Kangen Water. If you don't have a copy, Don't buy one, buy a bundle, share it with your friends. You can get it at kangenwaterstorelv.com. I've actually put it in here. It'll also be on the show notes in the bottom of the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your contribution. I know that you work diligently on this. It's just a pleasure to know you, and I feel grateful that our paths have crossed, and so much that you've done for us and for our company. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, Horst. It's just such an honor to have you on our show.
You're my man. I love you.
Love you too. Take care and have a wonderful evening.
Bye-bye.